I know you gotta.
Okay, I'm just gonna record and then you can edit and however you want. Does that work?
Oh, sure, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's gonna be kind of how do you say? No, it's not. It's gonna be kind of raw, I guess. That's the right word.
Yeah.
Just so if I say, anyways, definitely it's good to have you at the Cryptocosm. I know we're using your Zoom, but hey, we're gonna make it happen. So, first of all, for those who do not know who Tiffany Madison is, I mean, you are a multi-dimensional individual. I think that's the right word. I mean, you are an advisor, a consultant, storyteller, communications coach. Definitely, you're that part of Tiffany. I know. I see you on Facebook quite a lot, and and plus also you are a co-founder for 3 companies. So I mean, I don't know even where to begin, but you've been involved in blockchain, I guess libertarian politics. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it. And also you're into health in the health space. So I mean, it's pretty cool, but I actually, the reason I wanted to connect with you is more about cryptocurrencies and blockchain, and plus also you also work with some legendary people like John McAfee. So I mean, in the crypto space, I mean, he is definitely a legend. I know some people also think he's crazy, but hey, if you're gonna make if trying to get attention, you're trying to make trying to do big things, you gotta be, so instead of me just yapping about you, how about you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, no, thank you. That covered it. I'm an entrepreneur, multiple founder. Now I have gotten into pretty much consultancy and advisory space, both with companies and with individuals, mostly entrepreneurs. They're either in blockchain specifically or are dealing with blockchain or are in the investment space. So I'm working with 2 fund managers and a VC as well. And so as clients. And so, yeah, it's very rewarding and gratifying work. So thank you though, for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, because I looked at your history, and I mean, it's just like, no, I'm just, what do you say, admire the kind of work that you do. It's not only just blockchain, but on the other side, you've been working with a lot of military veterans, active and I guess retired as well, like
Right.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot the military terminology and
No,
stuff,
it's just veteran.
yeah,
No, you had it right. It's just veteran.
yeah. And also what's really cool is you also been involved in the cannabis industry as well. So because I know that industry has gone through a lot of ups and downs, similar to the crypto and blockchain space. So I mean, that's quite interesting. And now both those industries have really skyrocketed too, and gained a lot of attention. So now, because I think to me, I wanted to ask is like, how did you get into the cryptocurrency and blockchain space, as well as the cannabis industry too? So
yeah. Well, yeah. So initially I got in through events, and I co-created an organization called D10E that was sponsored by Brock Pierce, who is a venture capitalist and investor. And I co-created it with Matt McKibben, who is my business partner with Decentranet for many years. And essentially what we attempted to do as kind of, newbies ourselves into the Bitcoin blockchain space. We'd only been in for, the space then, this is 2014, 2015, was only, 8, 9, not even 9 years old, 7, 8 years old. And we were still newbies, right? Because the space was so small, the ecosystem really just was, everybody knew each other. And so when we were attending events, we realized that this echo chamber had developed over time. And so one thing that Brock found very compelling is the idea that we brought to the table, which was to bring together all of these different kind of ecosystems and industries that were all leveling the playing field with decentralization, but didn't realize they were doing that yet. So like drone companies, AI companies, 3D printing, getting all those guys talking to the blockchain and Bitcoin people. And that was really kind of our, just kind of like a boutique tech crunch disrupt, right? With way smaller budget. So we were really trying to kind of bring that, like, that kind of vibe, right? Of discovering what other innovators were doing and not just staying in your own little silo. So that really was my first foray and introduction into the space. I actually jumped over from the corporate world where I was engaging as a project manager. And I actually loved the libertarian space. It just, there was no money in it, right? And so I first jumped over to that and kind of played at all back then, right? Played in the startup world with libertarian organizations and liberty-oriented organizations. And then I fell in love with blockchain, actually through Jeffrey Tucker. If people are familiar with him, I used to work with him at an organization called Liberty Me, and which Matt Kibbe, I think, now owns. But originally I had a great idea, and he got me into all the blockchain Bitcoin concepts pretty early on because he was very fascinated by them. And then I just got pulled over, and once I got the bug, I never lost it. And so, yeah, we grew D10E into a pretty large organization. It went under new leadership and became an international organization after I went on to work for McAfee and some of his projects that he had. But yeah, it was a very good introduction because I entered the space when it was still very small and disruptive, and you could really meet people who, they were all poor back then, and now they've all gone on to be multi-billionaires. And it's pretty cool to watch really great human beings who were truly in it because they loved it, not because there was this massive financial incentive, because no one knew that the money would ever come, right? You had a hunch, but you weren't quite sure. I don't think any of them really expected crypto to take off the way it did. So it was really cool to get into the space that early and just watch its growth from afar. It's pretty nice.
Yeah. Now I'm glad you brought up, your foray into liberty or the libertarian ideals. And I love the part where you talked about, back in the day, most libertarians, and I remember too, I would consider myself as a foreign libertarian, like living in the plains of West Texas, like lifting that and the Federal Reserve, this crazy brown guy fighting for freedom, so. And I remember me and my other friend Mario Gale, I interviewed him early. He's in Costa Rica, so he's the one who introduced me to Dr. Ron Paul and about the Federal Reserve. And one of the common themes was most libertarians were broke. We were all just like naive or idealistic, young people. But what I noticed that there were a lot of libertarians in the blockchain space. But I think, I have to agree with you. I don't. Most of them never realized how big and how fast it grew. And would you say it's kind of nice to see a good amount of libertarians have created value, created wealth, and now they're pursuing many other things, It
is.
What do you say?
It's funny because I think a lot of the libertarians that are in the crypto space that I am very, familiar with and cozy with wouldn't call themselves have no association to the party. But they definitely may not even call themselves libertarians. They either call themselves, straight up anarchists or politically agnostic, or, I'm 5D, man. I don't worry about, 3 or 4D politics. But so I don't know that they even label themselves with the traditional thinkers or the classical liberal thinkers. But they definitely embody libertarianism in every way, shape, or form. And I think what attracts most of free, sovereign, individualistic, independent type thinkers and creators is the idea that essentially blockchain and Bitcoin, really essentially from a monetary perspective, is the first real enabler of the middle class to have direct financial empowerment. There is no middleman. There's no, in certain parts of the world, as you know, you literally have to know somebody to open a bank account, right? Or you have to be sponsored, or you have to have a certain amount of capital up front to get access to a bank. And, and seeing the financial empowerment that is capable for the middle class all over the world, and even the impoverished class all over the world, it just speaks to such a, fight for the underdog. That is a kind of philosophy that is the undercurrent of libertarian thinking. Empowering the individual as the large, the smallest minority in the world is the individual and the most oppressed. And so I think that's what's so attractive, is that Bitcoin really gets the middle guy out, the bureaucrat, the politician, the banker, the almost like vulture capitalist, right? It gets them out of the way and enables that direct financial empowerment. And so, yeah, there's a lot of synergy there, even if a lot of my crypto people don't want to claim it. There's a lot of alignment.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I'm glad you mentioned about many of them wouldn't claim to be part of the Libertarian Party, because personally for me, I wouldn't consider myself as part of the big L, the big LP or whatever. So I would consider myself as an anarcho-capitalist or anarchist, or another term would be voluntarist. I think that's a term Roger Ver would use quite a lot. But even Hotep Jesus, Brian Shaw, he outright calls himself an anarchist. Like they got to be proud of it. I know people kind of get scared by the word anarchist, but it's interesting. Like they don't. Many of them have also kind of walked away from the political organization stuff, because I know that can be quite painful in many ways. I think some have experienced. I get not blowback, but trauma. I don't know. It's I know I got tired of it. I know some of my friends were hurt by some of the politics, whether in the Libertarian or Republicans or Democrats. But speaking about politics, I happened to see a friendly endorsement from our special friend Hillary Clinton in some special event. She has endorsed Bitcoin.
Yeah.
When I mean endorse Bitcoin, she has stated that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies can destabilize nations. What do you think about that, Tiffany? I mean, is it possible? Can cryptocurrencies destabilize nations? Oh my goodness, that's scary.
I think inflation and runaway spending and having no budget probably stand more of a threat to destabilization than the next frontier of monetary policy. And so, you got to think of, you have to take the long view here, and you have to look at what, the candle makers, these are the candle makers, right? Is what they're facing, the electricity of money. And candles are always going to have a place, right? They're always going to be valuable. They're always going to be kind of your backup when the grid goes down, right? Your reliable, trusty candle. But you definitely, in the age of the electricity of money, are going to prefer the fastest, most competitive, most reliable, and the most transparent, trustless form of meaningful exchange of monies from person A to person B without the Hillary Clintons of the world in the middle, right? And so that's scary to her. That's scary to the global elite. And that's scary to anyone that doesn't trust people because they're used to ruling people, right? And so if I was a candle maker looking at the electricity of money, I would be pretty scared too. And I would try to make other people scared of this destabilizing currency. I mean, you look at some of the early propaganda, not all of it was wrong, right? About the electricity phenomenon taking off, and in the time period, some of the political cartoons and some of the newspaper articles that were produced by people that made a lot of money, facilitating candles. This electricity was just scary, and it was volatile, and you could die, and you could lose all of your savings, and the world's going to collapse, right? But really what it's doing is it's creating a new era that is the cat's out of the bag, and it's uncontrollable. And I think the state in and of itself is going to fight for preservation. And so there's this, as an agent of the state, she has a vested interest in preserving the order that she knows, right? And so dinosaurs
Right.
don't want a big asteroid to hit the earth because it's scary, right? But the asteroid's coming, and that is the complete disruption of the global financial system. And a lot of it is facilitated and precipitated by people like her. And she makes a lot of money off of the banks that pay her, right, to come do these speeches. And so, yeah, I mean, she has a vested interest 100% in advocating for fear mongering or this kind of, posture of doom and gloom, right? I would expect more of this because the state is kind of in that, that's like the old adage. I can't remember which intellectual said it now, but it's like, so I think it's almost like Schopenhauer, like the truth passes through 3 stages, right? And of course, it's vilified and laughed at and mocked, right? We've declared Bitcoin dead how many times, right? And then you get into the middle stage where they fight it, and then it's eventually just accepted, right? And so I think we're in a mixture, almost institutional decision by institutional decision, between that middle period and the late stage acceptance of it, right? And so it's almost like headline by headline, you see this volleying back and forth between fighting it and embracing it. And so she is going to advocate, and her ilk are going to advocate for the fighting it, right? And we'll see those activities, especially if Jerome Powell is appointed the head of the Federal Reserve. And it looks very likely we'll see the fight, and we'll see some of the attempts to destabilize this new technology. But ultimately, it is essentially like fighting the internet or fighting the adoption of electricity. It's not sustainable to continue this fight. And so unfortunately, history once again will prove her wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. That's no, I love the part where you talked about, first they kind of like ignore you, they laugh at you, they ignore you, then they fight you, and then you win. I guess that's kind of like a Mahatma Gandhi kind of saying too.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Anyways, I would love to talk about the cryptocurrency, the blockchain space, and you came in quite early, and I correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you might be one of the first women who entered the blockchain space. I think there was you. There's also I forgot her name, but I know her Instagram handle, Sky Corridor. I forgot.
Naomi Brockwell. Yeah.
Naomi Brockwell. Gotcha. Sorry. All right. My bad. Yeah, but there was you guys were one of the first women in the space. So I mean, could you share the experience? What was it like?
Yeah, I feel very spoiled. I really have been, I think, just truly blessed to have first of all, this is not my first foray in a male dominated environment. My entire social circle is, gun pilots. And prior to this, I worked in, I was a project manager in the, architecture, construction industry, luxury real estate. And so male dominated. And then really I've moved over in many different ways, the libertarian ecosystem, male dominated. And so I've almost always been in a male leadership role with predominantly male subordinates or colleagues or superiors. And so I always have to frame it that way, so that it's understood that this is not new to me. But, I got very lucky working with really humanistic people, and people who had already, were either, kind of, almost shamanistic in their belief in humans instead of identities. Does that make sense? And so they were really drawn toward competence and the ability to execute. And those are 2 things that I do very well. And so I was never treated, I think, to some of the sexism that I think other women that have come into the space later, now that you've got more finance bros and more like programmers from the Silicon Valley crowd. I think now that you've got that in there with like the Moon Lambo guys, the traders, right? I think the space might have evolved. And so I can't speak to that experience. I can't speak to that experience. The experience I can speak to is more of, can you get it done? And are you an ethical, good person great. And if you have, if you got tits, then doesn't really matter. Like, just get it done. Okay. And so to me, I think that I got very spoiled by that, because I've heard a lot of very unfortunate stories of young women that have entered the space now that have told me about some pretty alarming sexism. And, in the West, framing it, right? The most extreme sexism that I have ever encountered. And I mean, I'm an 8th generation Texan. I've worked with good old boys from the oil fields to soldiers who, fly the most sophisticated attack helicopter in the world. And I've never been spoken down to in a sexist manner outside of the Wall Street people and that crowd, right? And so I think the more of that we bring in, the more sexism is there. And so I feel like a lot of their experience is influenced by that culture. And that is a very unfamiliar culture to me. In fact, I've been condescended to and didn't even realize it was happening. I was so surprised, because it's almost like seeing an animal in the wild to be talked down to by someone who, I probably have 10 IQ points on. So I'm like, wait, are you man? Are you telling me? So I feel like my experience is probably not representative. I also engaged very early on in the crypto space with a lot of what I would consider to be like Renaissance men, very active in the plant medicines. Most of them were Buddhists or a hybrid of Buddhism. And so there was just this very humanistic, this sounds very optimistic and starry-eyed, but it's the true testament to my experience. And so there wasn't any of this, hierarchical, treatment, I guess, of other people in my experience. But again, that's early in the space. And I know and honor the fact that I was very fortunate and blessed to work with people who had that posture and adopted that type of attitude. And that's not reflective of everyone's experience.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that experience, because because I've seen a lot of folks from different industries, like from the gambling industry and your IT. Then you got a lot of even so traditional finance space. A lot of these guys are coming into cryptos. I guess they got recruited, because now crypto, all these companies have lots of money. But these executives keep coming in. The only reason they're coming in is not because they are interested in the technology and the future and stuff, but they're getting paid big salaries, right? So, but I was curious to ask you, like, if you were to kind of like guide, new women into the space, would it be your words of wisdom, to share the future women who are kind of entering the blockchain crypto space, what they need to look out for, and how they can be successful in this, ever-growing, turbulent industry?
Yeah, I guess it would depend on what element of the industry they're entering, right? So I am a huge advocate of needing more marketers and communicators, which are, a traditionally female dominated kind of, almost enclave of the larger, corporate communication structure. It's a very niche kind of ecosystem. And I think a lot of women are very good at communicating. We're capable of a unique skill set, not that men aren't, but of really, I think, attaching not necessarily emotion, but marketing is creating and gendering feeling, right? And so it's taking what could ordinarily be very boring, I don't want to say boring because it's useful, but you could really see some of the technology that's being developed as not necessarily interesting to the majority of people who might encounter it, right? But I think women uniquely have the ability in the marketing communication space to tell a story around a use behind a technology and how it impacts human beings on like a human person to person level. And I feel that is a really strong skill set that's super useful in this space. And so if you are in marketing communications and you want to come in, contact me. I will mentor you, first of all. But then on top of that, I would find other women in the space that, exactly, that have other women in the space that have positive experiences about where this technology is going, that are actually in it because they value what it's doing for humanity, not necessarily just making a buck, right? That would be kind of just my first kind of thing to throw out there. My second one would be, have a rule set for what you want to actually work on, because there's so many companies hiring in this space now that there's really no reason to settle. Do not work for assholes. There's no reason to work for assholes. You can pick and choose. And if you have the talent and you have the actual knowledge behind you, you don't have to settle for any project, and you don't have to take any bullshit from anybody, right? You've got enough work out there right now. And so my third thing would be, really find ethical people and then dig into what they're creating. Become a subject matter expert. You don't need to understand how to code, all the different idiosyncrasies behind a technology. You need to understand it fundamentally enough to use it and explain it simply. And if you can understand, and this is one thing too that I think a lot of developers and people who are in the heavy development side of these various technologies, they really need people that kind of do come in from an outside perspective to parachute into the project and figure out how to translate all the magic that's happening to people who don't understand it, right? And it's like, nobody wants to know how the iPhone works, lesson by lesson. They want to know its functionality and its use. And I think there's a skill set, if you can patch into a project, understand the technical functionality enough to grasp it, and then can use that grasp knowledge to then communicate to the larger world what's taking place there. And so don't be intimidated by the technology. Find ethical people who are creating things that really change the world, and get to work. Roll up your sleeves and dive in.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's pretty cool. You talk about, work, don't sell for less, work for ethical people, and definitely don't work for assholes. I mean, there are plenty in this space, but I love the part where you talked about, working with developers, because one thing I learned is like in some of these cryptocurrency groups, I'll use, for example, the Monero community, that, there are a lot of really smart individuals, but the way they market themselves or the messaging, I mean, it definitely needs a lot of work. They need like marketing people. They need people who could, communicate to the Joes and Janes around the world. But dealing with some of these developers, and I guess sometimes as a marketing professional or someone who's a communications expert or specialist, sometimes you have to be like kind of like an autistic whisperer or something, to these guys, like, to be able to, like,
yeah,
bring them into, like the mainstream. And I guess the reason I bring that up is because previously, like, just seeing some of the there have been some sort of little bit of infighting within certain, cryptocurrency groups, not just Monero, but other groups as well. And there's always some sort of like a technical issue or a political issue. So, I mean, not in terms of politics, but just, within groups. But I guess the point is like, I mean, if you can just dive deeper into like, why some of these protocols or projects, they need like really good marketing and messaging specialists or experts,
Yeah. I think you'll see.
I hope you get.
Yeah, I think the NFT space might be one of the first applications of these technologies that might attract the kind of Silicon Valley communications and marketing crowd first. I'll give you an example. I'm working on Sundance Film Festival, and we're launching an NFT and immersive lounge at Sundance for the first year. And I was just kind of looking at all of the great companies that I admire in the NFT space, either because I invested in the picks and shovels, right? Very early on. I don't buy NFTs. I buy, access and coins into what I believe are some of the cool protocols like Dapper Labs Flow and all those guys. But I was looking at some of the cool projects and trying to, through LinkedIn, check out what marketing teams were being used to sell their product to the non-crypto savvy space, right? Because they're having to translate what an NFT is to artists and sports figures and teams. And so they're really in a unique position to try to explain what these things do and how they empower the person who's NFTing themselves or their art, right? And that's a complicated task. And so I was just curious from a nerd out perspective, like who were the communicators that were really like leveraging whatever their skill sets were from whatever ecosystem they're bringing in into the NFT space. And I found a lot of really interesting Silicon Valley startup people that were now jumping in to the big players in, the top 5 big players in the NFT space, OpenSea and all these other guys. And so it was cool to see that natural transition, whereas the Silicon Valley crowd probably would not. You had to be a true believer to really jump over into this space, 5 years ago. But now the space is getting attractive because it has more money, and it's targeting mainstream established industries outside of finance. Right? Because I was mostly in blockchain enterprise, right? And then I got into the DeFi world, which is very attractive and sexy to me. But then during my time in those two spaces, I completely lost track of NFTs and where those were going. My original theory is that they would be adopted by niche gaming environments, right? Like Hearthstone. And I wrote an article with my co-founders back in 2019 where we were kind of predicting where this would go. And we really thought esports eventually, right? But we never envisioned that NFTs would essentially do for artists what streaming eventually did for musicians, right? Like creating independent, community-oriented, direct access to their fan base, right? And being able to monetize with no middleman. We didn't envision that, I think. And so seeing that kind of take off into these mainstream, financially influx with capital, different industries, I think has attracted some external talent. And that's allowed the storytelling and the marketing communications around what these technologies do to really elevate and to grow and develop in real time. And that's been really, really wonderful for me to watch. I just kind of cheer it on every time I see, like, BlockFi kills it on Instagram. I haven't even reached out to whoever their communications person is, but I super fan them all the time. They do a fantastic job of explaining DeFi to the average person who has no idea what decentralized finance is. So I think we're going to see more of that, which is really exciting.
Wow. Okay. No, definitely want to check out BlockFi. I haven't. I've used Celsius and some other companies, but as far as the marketing for BlockFi, that's kind of new to me. But definitely want to check that out because I'm just now I'm just starting to see marketing and especially the messaging side. I mean, that's becoming way important than ever before. Because already on top of that, here in Dubai, there's so many companies. They all are, participating in all these events and stuff. There's so much noise. So, even some people have approached me and stuff, to try to help them coach, how to buy Bitcoin and all this other stuff. They don't know where to begin. There's just too many. So how do you stand out? How do you? So I don't know. So I think I think later on, I think there's going to be a lot of marketing opportunities for a lot of people out there, and especially for women too. Usually, like you said, right? Usually that's kind of like a female-dominated space. But anyways, I want to talk to you about the legendary, of course, John McAfee, and because I definitely admire the guy because he was a libertarian candidate, and I also liked his nomadic history when he left the U.S. and what do you say? He moved to the Caribbean. I forgot the name of the country, but I know he moved back, traveled quite a bit and stuff. But I was kind of, but I was curious to know, how did you meet up with him? And did he find you, or did destiny call each other? I mean, like, how did that happen?
Actually, so I have a very good friend of mine who is a fantastic libertarian photographer. He's actually an entrepreneur as well, Judd Weiss, in the libertarian space. And so Judd has gone around to all sorts of fantastic events throughout the years and taken really iconic photos. But he and I had worked together on some small little projects here and there. And he had known about the event production, project management experience that I had in the crypto space. And when he came on board with John McAfee for the 2016 Libertarian presidential race, he came on as his vice presidential candidate and immediately saw that the campaign was being sabotaged, essentially. And so the previous campaign manager, before I jumped in for the last 8 weeks of the program, 6 to 8 weeks, was essentially not doing what he should have been doing. And so, he conveniently went to go work for Gary Johnson afterwards. And so I have a feeling he was working for Gary the whole time. But essentially there were people that, were contacting the campaign, trying to volunteer, that were never being contacted. John had 1,100 volunteers from every walk of life you can imagine, from, programmers to housewives to civil libertarian activists to, Black nationalists that were like, man, I love you. I want to do whatever I can to help you. Never contacted in any way, shape, or form. And so donors weren't being reached out to, media was not being contacted. And so Judd he got a whiff of this pretty early on. He knew I was a systems builder. He knew that I had no aversion to working with eccentric mavericks, right? And brought me in essentially and asked me to jump in. And I scaled the campaign from 0 volunteers to almost 100 in 2.5 weeks. I didn't sleep, but I knew that Judd was on to something, that 2016 hallmark election, and that, I didn't have kids back then, but it was a hallmark election where people really wanted to hear from irreverent disruptors. And Trump was just proving that over and over again. And so where the Libertarian Party thought it might be a good idea to put, well-intentioned milquetoast candidate like Gary Johnson out there, I saw that Judd had a really good point, that people were looking for someone to trailblaze a new narrative. And unfortunately, Trump took all of that momentum and then, of course, ran it into the ground. But it was attractive to me because John told me, first of all, he subjected himself, because I'm a former investigative journalist. I wrote for the Washington Times. I was a columnist. I covered the war on terror. I covered privacy and domestic terrorism and all sorts of, lovely, salacious topics. And when I first decided to work with him, I did a cursory Google search and I'm like, I am not attaching my stellar reputation to this human. So he answered every question I had. He was a total open book. And of course, my radar is always up for psychopaths and for bullshit artists. And so I dug deep and I hit him hard over and over again with some pretty gruesome questions, and he answered every single one. And so that I decided, all right, you know what? Fuck it. So I did. But it was really, as a libertarian, I really appreciated that he was super transparent very early on, that I have no illusions about winning. So don't expect that, but let's take this as far as we can, and let's get as much attention on the topics around what libertarians should be discussing and bringing to the forefront as we possibly can. And then another thing that most people don't realize about that run is that he basically came to me and said, look, you're a startup dork. You love startups, right? So let's actually go in and audit the Libertarian Party and find out why it is so dysfunctional. And then when I get in there, I'll actually lead this party like a startup CEO. Like, let's actually get people in place. Let's find out where things are broken. Let's set up systems that allow us to scale this organization. And so he launched what was called the Vote Different initiative that basically allowed me to go in, and we did this huge poll of all the libertarian state chairs and the people who were at the leadership level. and at the city and state level, and found some pretty endemic problems that, of course, the Libertarian Party leadership had zero interest in. And so he literally said, how quickly could you build an infrastructure? And let me tell you, this is a whole other topic in and of itself, so I won't go down there, but just from that poll that we had like a couple hundred respondents from, there was zero local candidate support taking place for like people who are running for sheriff and constable or, you know, comptroller, like electable positions, right? No infrastructure. Whereas the Republicans and Democrats will give you a campaign in a box, right? So he said, you and the team go build a campaign in the box, right? Then we were looking at, okay, well, these people who have no infrastructure, no support, how are they actually onboarding volunteer interest? Because the Libertarian Party was growing in 2016 because people were looking for alternatives. And so literally half the people that we talked to had no systems for onboarding volunteers. They were taking phone calls on their personal cell phones and weren't tracking them anywhere. There was no automation. So he basically said, go design systems that will allow people to onboard people quickly, get them in some emailing. Like, do we need to go to MailChimp and buy 10,000 licenses in bulk for every state chapter? Right. And so that is what attracted me to, once I kind of sold him on that idea and he realized there was a big problem, he was ready to go had he gotten the nomination. And so that to me was, he wanted to actually build systems around the concepts, not just talk about shit. And that to me was very interesting. So that's how I got started and why I stayed in the campaign and really tried to make something happen from it, if we could.
Wow. Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that point about like on the local level. There wasn't much support for libertarians like on the local level. And for example, I was living in West Texas. I mean, like maybe I remember there's maybe like one or two, but I was like, okay, but I mean, I like there was the like I guess the Libertarian Party official support kind of stuff. There was not much news or anything like that. I mean, it was kind of weird. I mean, and I also infrastructure too. I don't know. I mean, for me personally, I didn't think there was any infrastructure. Okay. Yeah. Oh man. But anyways, I mean, we all know
now? I mean, it's 2021. Is there any infrastructure now? No, there's not. So
not at all. I don't think so. No. But anyways, we know what happened after that. So, but I guess the people listening in, they're sort of aware, but they are kind of like walked away. But one question I got to ask you is Bill Weld. Is he the original libertarian? Apparently, according to Gary Johnson.
No. That was again. People trying to play the establishmentarian politic game. That's all that was. Bless his heart.
Because even like some of my my Democrat friends too, I guess acquaintances back in the day, they were like, wait, is he really like, because I remember Bill Weld's from Massachusetts, right? If I'm correct.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. But no. I know it was quite a shame, like how it all, ended with all that, all the Libertarian Party stuff. But I'm glad that a lot of people have walked away and they have focused their energies into what the example what you're doing. You're trying to build freedom through entrepreneurship and other forms of I guess what do you call like social entrepreneurship. Would that be defined correctly?
Yeah, I think company building, creating value, sharing expertise. It goes back to this phrase that I thought I was uniquely resurrecting, that I most certainly am not. Other people are using it in spades and it's beautiful. I love to see it. It's the rising tide lifts all boats kind of philosophy. And I think that economic prosperity, value creation, engaging in market making dynamics are very important to helping facilitate economic growth and opportunity for other people. And so that to me is a far more meaningful use of time. That doesn't mean that I'm not interested in politics or that most people who are engaged, I mean, if you're in business, you live politics, right? I just think that right now there's, if you acquire skills to actually build something and then enter politics, you have a far more, I think, wise perspective, right? You've gained wisdom through applying your life energy to something to create meaningful value for other people. And how can you run for office and represent other people if you don't even understand how to make a customer happy or how to communicate to your customer, right? And so I think there's a lot of, altruistic capitalism. There's a lot of conscious capitalism that our generation really loves. And so I think endeavoring to build in that ecosystem before you come into the political realm is a really good idea. For me, it's been a very great use of time, but I'll eventually run for office at some point. And I'm sure that, our generation's just getting started, right? We haven't even begun to really, most of the millennials, the elder millennials are just now turning 40. I'm not even 40, right? And I'm a millennial. And so we're not even, most of us have been building businesses and watching all these establishments and all these infrastructures fail left and right. We've seen what the baby boomers have done to this country and how they run it into the ground. And if they don't get us all killed, I think we're actually on to something pretty powerful. And so I think a lot of us have to kind of step up into the arena and throw our hat in the ring and try to represent other people who we value in our communities and their interests. And so eventually I'll do that, but getting into the market and actually having fulfillment and gratification from successful business results, it fills your well, so that when you get into politics and they drain it, you're starting from a full cup. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, great. Yeah. No, but I think the work that you're doing is really awesome. Like, I think to me, it's really a good example for many other libertarians or actually anyone too. Like, whatever their political background is, but I mean, starting your own business, starting your own company. I think that's or whatever venture it is a great way to, I guess, increase your financial confidence, raise your human capital, and also create a way to spread economic and financial freedom, for not just for you, but for everyone else. So I think that I think that's something for me, but also many other people, other younger people out there too. I mean, I think they'll love to do the kind of work that you're doing too. So I think that's pretty awesome. But anyways, I'll love to finish this off with maybe just for you to share some words of wisdom for some of the say, like, I guess, the young Americans, but also other people around the world too. Many of them are sort of, passionate about, social causes, and also sometimes they also get drawn into the political side of things. But would you advise them to, get into entrepreneurship?
Yes, I think the productive class, the entrepreneurial class, is the only ecosystem capable of truly changing the world. And politics is downstream from culture, and culture is directly tied to business, and business is tied to markets, and markets are people. And so people getting into markets and getting into business influences culture, which then influences politics. And so I think if you're remotely interested in culture or politics, then get into business and become your own creator. Also, you're less dependent on anyone when you have money, right? I keep seeing this anti-work culture as this kind of extreme response to the hustle culture of working all the time. And I think there's a nice, healthy grounding in the middle where rather than being anti-work and saying, well, I don't need money, right? I can just live off of nothing and grow my own food and live off the grid, right? You know, the government will take care of me. That is a very dangerous and super scary trend that I see happening right now for younger crowds.
Agreed.
And so, yeah, I would reject that wholesale and say, you don't have to hustle until you're, you know, and this is coming from someone who used to work 80-hour work weeks and sleep 4 hours a night and maybe even miss sleep for 2 days in a row because I was so obsessed with the projects that I was working on. That's unsustainable and unhealthy. Don't do that, right? But you can find a happy balance in the middle.
Right.
And that's being fulfilled in your work so that it doesn't feel like work. That's what I would strive toward. And that is, to me, you know, humans seek meaning. We all look for meaning in what we're doing. So find something truly meaningful, as cliche as that sounds. Find something where you're excited to jump out of bed and get after it. And that is not hard to do in this beautiful world where you have the entire compendium of human knowledge right here in your hand. So get after it, quit making excuses. That's probably the best advice I can get.
That's awesome. Hey, Tiffany. Yeah, no, that's great advice, and definitely I'm gonna take it too. So I mean, actually, that answers for mostly for me than my audience. You know, so that's how I feel. But yeah. Anyways, Tiffany, thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise.
For
Thank
coming
you for
in.
inviting me.
I really enjoyed this. You know, this conversation. Just you sharing your experience and some of your exciting projects you got going on. So glad to have you at the Cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I appreciate it, and I hope we get to do it again.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Anyways.
Awesome. Thanks. Take care.
All right, yeah.
All right.